Gerbeschacht. I'm the director of volunteer and community programs at Literacy Pittsburgh. I'm sure if we have not met before, it's lovely to meet you. I'm sure you've received emails from me at some point in time. Also here is Katie Critchfield, Katie Critchfield, our tutoring specialist. Katie is going to be our co-host today. For this session, it's going to be really interactive. So I ask that you are welcome to just ask your questions in the moment if they're relevant to what we're talking about. If you have any very specific questions to your learner, your tutoring situation, please do not use student names. This is being recorded. And B, please save them to the end. We'll go over them after the recording is done, or we'll make time to meet with you next week if you have any larger questions. So I'm going to share my screen. As you all know, we're going to be talking about a picture is worth 1,000 words, how to fill a 2-hour session with one picture. So we'll be talking about a few different strategies today. Again, as I mentioned, my name is Hannah Gerbeschacht. I would also like to thank, before we get started, Anita Cohen and Lisa Morse. Anita is our Squirrel Hill coordinator. Lisa is our Pittsburgh East coordinator. And they are the ones who came up with the outline and did most of the PowerPoint. So I want to thank them also. All right, so we're going to get started. The agenda for our meeting. So I would love you all to walk away with at least one new idea using a picture that you can use in your lessons. So we'll be talking about an activity, language experience activity, or LEA, for probably the first like 2/3 of our presentation. We'll be doing that. And then we'll have a group discussion about how else could we use this picture in lessons, and I'll have a few extra ideas as well. So an LEA, language experience activity. So who is relatively new, like has been through training in the last year? Anyone? The people that I see currently, I know are longtime tutors. So anybody relatively new, I see a couple of people raising their hands. So LEA is something that you would have learned during your training, but I think it's really beneficial to go over it again. So a language experience activity is a reading and speaking activity. And the tutor is eliciting students' working vocabulary and English language skills. So you can use this for both English language learners as well as American-born adult education students. And what you're going to be doing is asking them to tell a story, asking them to describe something, and then writing down their words exactly as they say them. Correct nothing, word for word, exactly what they say. And then you're going to use that, what they write, to build upon their knowledge, to work on their reading skills, work on their vocabulary skills. So that is what an LEA is. So we're going to watch a couple quick videos about LEAs. I don't know about you all when you're doing presentations, but I love to, not have to speak all the time. So I like having videos as well. So we're going to watch a couple different videos. Actually, we're going to go over the steps first because I forgot a slide. So the steps for the LEA. So the very first thing you're going to do is ask the students to speak. So that can be asking them to describe a picture, tell a story, tell a memory, describe your favorite food and how you make it. It can be anything. You're looking for about a paragraph, 5 to 7 sentences. The next step is you're going to pull out with the students, what are some of the vocabulary words or spelling words out of this story? And then you're going to read it together. And you're going to do that in a scaffold way, that I do, we do, you do. So you're first going to read it, then you're going to do it together with your student, then the student's going to do it by themselves. You're going to ask some comprehension questions about the story. Ask if there's anything the student would want to change after they finish, and then review any errors that you come across in future sessions. So if they make the same grammatical error a couple times, that's a really good lesson to do the next week. And now we're going to watch a couple quick videos. So this first video is by a professor named Dr. Andy Johnson out of, I believe, Minnesota State University. And he has a PhD in literacy instruction. So this is a quick 2-minute video describing language experience approach or language experience activity. And I realized when I shared my screen, I didn't share it for sound. So I'm going to do that one more time and share for sound. Okay.
Andy Johnson, Minnesota State University Strategy, the language experience approach, or language experience activities. This is perfect for emergent or beginning readers at the emergent and beginning levels, because it uses words and concepts with which they are familiar. The teacher asks them about an experience and writes down what the student says. This can be done with large group, as the teacher is doing here, but I use it a lot individually with my tutoring students. So the student is practicing reading, again, using words and concepts with which they are familiar. It's perfect to practice reading, and you can use it for phonics mini lessons as well, and I'll show you how to do this. And it's great for developing fluency. It's one of a multi-level, multi-dimensional strategies. So as I said, large group, small group, individually. Here's the steps. Have an experience. Step 2, ask the students, what do you want to say about it? And then write. And as you're writing down, you're doing some edits, and I find it's good to break large sentences into small sentences. We want to make things as easy as possible, and we sound out the words as we are writing them so the students can see it. We read through it using scaffolded oral reading, where we provide just enough structure to enable students to read it without frustration. After a first read-through, student rereads until they can read it fluently. Usually that's 2 or 3 times total. And then a phonics mini lesson, I'll show you how to do that. But we save these, especially if I'm using a computer, so we can practice reading what they've written in past days. Example, this is one I actually did with a student. I went skiing on Friday. I fell when I was getting off the chairlift. I went to my Aunt Case. She's writing about things with which she is familiar. To make this a phonics mini lesson, I would say, there's a word here that begins with a sound. What is it? And she'd point to it and say, fell. Yes, there's a word here that ends with the has the sound at the end. Went. Very good. That's exactly how you do it. Very effective. Keep it simple. Here's another one. I like to have a minimum of 5 sentences so it just doesn't become a list. So it's a paragraph form. And I sometimes have a picture. Students, if they don't know what to say, they can describe the picture. Lots of tricks. And that is just another strategy to try.
That was a quick description of what an LEA is and the fact that you can use it with a picture, you can use it with a story, a memory. There's a lot of different ways you can use it. So for time's sake, let me think about how much time. I think we have time for the next video. So the next video is from the Sonoma County Literacy Program. It's one of their training videos, and this is someone completing an LEA with a student. So Sonoma County, I'm sorry, it's not Sonoma, it's Solano County, between San Francisco and Sacramento. All right, so this video is a tutor and a student actually completing an LEA together as an example.
So Bob, we read about lots of different ways to find jobs, and we've been reading about different jobs. So what are you thinking?
Can people hear? It's a pretty quiet video.
That one is a little quiet. Does it go any louder, Hannah?
It doesn't. So I'm gonna just skip it. That's okay. We're gonna complete one together anyway, so you'll be able to have an example of an LEA. I will share that video in the notes so you can watch it on your own. It's about a 4 or 5 minute long video of completing an LEA. So let's go over the steps one more time together. So in LEA, you're going to ask a student to tell a story, describe a picture, something using 5 to 7 sentences with their own vocabulary, their own English language knowledge. You're going to pull out the vocabulary and spelling words that you see. You're going to read it together several times, ask comprehension questions, ask students if there's anything they'd like to change, and review errors in future sessions. So now is going to be the fun part. We're going to do an LEA together. So this picture is from Standout 5, our highest level English language textbook that we use. So first, I'm going to have everyone just take a minute and look at this picture, decide what is happening, get a story in your head about what's going on, and then we're going to do an LEA together. So this is going to be a good example of how you could do an LEA in a group, because I'm going to call upon a few different people to just give me the first sentence, give me the next sentence. You're going to like tell a story together as a group based on this picture. For ease, Katie, I'm going to have you just give me the first sentence and then like popcorn to random people if that works for you. So you can see the next first step is highlighted. The first step is we're going to write down 5 to 7 sentences. So the picture is still in the corner. And Katie, can you give me the first sentence you'd like to say about this picture?
One person is trying to sleep in their bed.
Great. New popcorn, call
Do you
upon
want me
someone
to
else to
call
get the
somebody
next.
else? Sure. I will ask Lynn to give us the next sentence. Lynn Juback.
The person appears to be very tired.
New popcorn, call upon someone else, Lynn. Are you able to see the list of people who are here, Lynn? I'm not sure from your perspective.
No.
No? How about
No.
Katie? Can you just assign, if you don't mind?
Sure. Anne K.
Sure. The guy next door is yelling at the TV.
Okay. Jeff, could you give us the next sentence?
Jack, the neighbor, loves loud videos.
I like that you assigned him a name. Thank you, Jeff.
Donna, could you give us a sentence?
Sure. The person in bed is very annoyed.
So we have 5, which we could stop here, Hannah, unless anybody else has anything to add. I think we might have told us.
Yeah, anyone want to add like one final sentence?
It's a long, long night.
Great. Perfect. So that's a great example of doing an LEA together as a group. So as like having the group tell a story based on a picture, one sentence per person. So give me just 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and copy this story into the future slides so we can do the next steps together as a group. All right, so we've got our story. We've got 6 sentences about this picture. So the next step is to pull out vocabulary or spelling words. So looking at this story, can someone call out what they think a good spelling word or vocabulary word in the story is?
Neighbor.
Neighbor.
Annoyed.
Appears.
Is trying.
Yelling.
I was going to say that one if no one else did. Yelling. I think that's a good. Oh, was there another one?
Night.
Night. Great. 1 per line. That's fantastic. So you would do this with a student and work on going over what the vocabulary is here. You know, they said the words out loud. Are they able to describe what the meaning is to the word? Practice spelling it with the students. This can be another whole lesson, is going over these words in particular. Okay. So the next step is to read it together. So I mentioned before, this is the scaffolding: I do, we do, you do. So the very first thing you do with your learners is to read it out loud to them, and they have it in front of them that they can read along. One person is trying to sleep in their bed. The person appears to be very tired. The guy next door is yelling at the TV. Jack, the neighbor, loves loud videos. The person in bed is very annoyed. It's a long, long night. So that's the I do part. I read it out loud. And then the we do, there's a couple different ways we can do it. I can read a sentence and you repeat. We can all read it together at the same time. So I'm going to do read and repeat first as an example. So I'd love if you could unmute so I'm not just hearing my own voice. So one person is trying to sleep in their bed.
One
person is trying to sleep
Sleep in their bed.
The person appears to be very tired.
The
The
person
appears
appears to be very tired.
The guy next door is yelling at the TV.
The guy next door is yelling at the TV.
Jack, the neighbor, loves loud videos.
Jack,
The neighbor loves loud videos.
The person in bed is very annoyed.
The
person in bed
is very annoyed.
It's a long, long night.
It's
a long
night.
Great. And then another way you can do that, as I mentioned, is just everyone reads it out loud together at the same time, trying to do around the same pace. And then finally is the you do part of it. So you are asking the reader, the learner to read it. So if you have a group, you can put them in pairs. One person reads it, then the next person reads it. You can do the popcorn reading where one person is reading one sentence and then calling upon the next person. If it's just one-on-one, you can just ask the student to read it out loud to you as well.
may I ask a question?
Of course, Jeff.
What's the purpose of reading it together if everyone's doing it and you can't hear any, it's hard to really understand what's going on.
Sure. So it is building the confidence of learners that you're not asking them to do it alone immediately. So so even if they make mistakes, it's a group activity where you're not calling upon them. Okay, now student A, read the whole thing in front of everyone.
Got it.
Any other questions?
I just,
Great.
I see why my learners are reluctant to do a choral reading in Zoom because it's so discombobulating.
It's
the
a
way
little-
the delay, it's just a very strange experience.
It is, but it's still, it's good practice. Even if they're just focusing on their own words when they're saying it. But I can understand that there's a lot of, it's a lot at one time hearing voices over Zoom.
Hannah, one suggestion to mitigate that problem is to have everybody stay on mute except for the tutor, and then everybody reads together. Then you hear the tutor and you hear yourself, but no, you're not hearing everybody else in the group. So that's one way to do a choral reading online, which is...
That's a great suggestion.
I
Thank
love
you,
that.
Katie. Yeah. So the next step is to pick out comprehension questions from this story. And this can be, this could end up being a writing activity as well. You could write down some comprehension questions and then they have to read the question and write the answer. So for example, what is the name of the neighbor? And then the neighbor is Jack. Do you see any other comprehension questions from this story?
How about next door?
Can you list, what would the question be, Bill?
Oh, what do you mean by next door?
Okay, yeah. So that's more of a vocabulary question than necessarily a comprehension question. But I think that's a good, from the from step 2, the pulling out the vocabulary words, I think that would fall under that part. So can you give the definition or use next door in a sentence?
What is the neighbor doing?
Yeah, what is the neighbor doing? So the neighbor is yelling at the TV. Any other comprehension questions?
Why is the person in bed very annoyed?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you can see even from like a simple 5, 6, 7 sentence story, there are questions that you can find. There are comprehension questions. There are vocabulary words, spelling words. There's lots of activities that can come out of this. So the next step in an LEA is to ask, is there anything that they would like to change? After we've gone over it together, we've read the story several times, talked about comprehension questions. Is there anything they want to change? This maybe not necessarily, you know, we're all, well, I don't want to assume, but most of us are native English language speakers. I'm not seeing any major grammatical errors or anything like that. But from your learner, there might be things that they want to correct or they want to change.
So there's
And
there's one difference between the earlier video and what you described here, is that in the video, the gentleman was correcting as they told the story.
He did mention that he was making some edits. I took those edits as more like writing it line by line in the way that I did here than necessarily correcting errors, but maybe I was misunderstanding what he was saying. But I did notice that he said, and I make some edits. I disagree. I think that you should write it word for word, but write it in a way that it makes it easier to read. Like you can see I put 1 sentence per line. If it's a long sentence, maybe try to break it up so it's going to be easier to read for the students.
Okay.
So you would write down grammatically incorrect sentences and then engage in repetition of those grammatically incorrect sentences. I'm trying to figure out the rationale for that.
Yeah, I would, just so they are hearing what they wrote and they can maybe process if it sounds correct or sounds incorrect. Katie, do you agree?
Yeah, that is how this exercise is designed, and it sounds maybe counterintuitive, but it's something that you can then focus on. So this is really like the reading exercise, is they're writing text with vocabulary that they're familiar with, and then practicing reading that text. But definitely, if there are grammatical errors, it's something that you would want to pull out for later work. And you can save these as well. You can make like a portfolio of this kind of text, and then you'll be able to look back at it with your students and say, look, when we did this 6 months ago, all of these errors were here. And now you're able to write a much more complex text and your errors are much fewer. And that can be a nice experience as well.
Mm-hmm. So that's the final step, is the reviewing the errors in future lessons. So coming back to what they wrote, identifying the grammatical errors, having a whole lesson about it, and then giving them again and say, can you pull out any errors? Can you correct the errors from what you spoke about and what we read last week?
So that would be a separate lesson.
Correct. Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm gonna ask you, we just went over the steps a couple times. So who can tell me what is the first step of an LEA?
Write a story or describe a story.
Yeah, describe a picture, tell a memory, write a story. So there's a lot of different options, but what we're looking for is 5 to 7 sentences. What's the next step?
Vocabulary.
Mm-hmm. So pull out vocabulary and or
Spelling.
Grammar.
Words.
Oh, spelling.
Mm-hmm. What's the third step?
I do, you do, I do, we do, you do.
Yeah, exactly. So read it together and read it in that scaffold way that Donna just said. So I, as the tutor, read it first, and then we do it together, either choral reading or simultaneous. And then you do it alone. Step 4.
Comprehension.
Yeah, exactly. Ask comprehension questions. Step 5.
See if they want to make changes.
Mm-hmm. And this would be a good like step to see if they realize the errors that they've made, the grammatical errors, if they can call it out at that moment or not. And then the final step, I kind of gave a hint to what it is.
Future lessons.
Review errors in future lessons. So that's one way you can use a picture in a lesson. And this, you know, it can take up a good amount of a lesson, telling a story as a group, or telling a story one-on-one, depending on your tutoring situation, pulling out the words, having some vocabulary activities based on the words, practicing spelling them, reading it together, coming up with comprehension questions. It's a whole lesson. And if you have multiple students, you can try to do like multiple stories, depending on how much time you need. So next is going to be a group activity, and we're going to use Jamboard. Has anybody ever used Jamboard before? Does it sound familiar? So Jamboard is something on Google that you can go and write on the same board that everyone's doing at the same time. And we'll go over it together. But my question is, what ideas do you have? How else could you use this picture in a lesson? Do you have any ideas of activities about a picture like this? So I'm going to open Jamboard. I'm probably going to have to reshare my screen. And then I'm also going to put it in the chat. So everyone will have access to Jamboard. So I'm going to put something in the chat and you put that in to your browser. So everyone in meeting, hopefully when I do everyone in meeting, it's just going to do our breakout room and not literally everyone, but we'll find out. So in the chat, I just put a link to Jamboard. So you're going to see, it says use the sticky note, and that's this icon.
Hannah, the link is not working. It looks like you might have posted a picture or something. I'm not sure. It's not a link.
Oh, it's not a link. Let me try that again. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. All right. So I'm going to put that in again.
There we go. That looks
Does it
good.
work that time? Okay, perfect. So you can see at the very top, this is the directions of how to use a Jamboard. So on the left-hand side, at least on my screen, you can see these are sticky notes, and you can press and then type in what would you do with this picture. So for example, we just did LEAs. So I'm going to put that in and save. So there's one sticky note is like what you can do. So do you have other ideas? You can do a sticky note or a text box and type in what ideas do you have for this picture? What other activities might you be able to use with this picture? How's Jamboard going for everyone? Oh, I see something. Point of view, story from the man on the left, and then story from, yeah, okay. I think they have two very different stories going on, so I think that would be a good activity. So come up with what are people saying, like come up with a dialogue. Ask what the man is watching, then ask them to describe their favorite TV programs or movies. Great. Do you think these people know each other? So ask some questions about these people. Yeah, it was interesting that you wrote that it was neighbors. I was reading it as them being a couple when I was looking at the picture initially. What happens next? Creative writing exercises, making inferences. And we'll give this another minute or two in case people are still working on their ideas. Okay. I see something coming up. Just so, again, this is called Jamboard. So this is something that's pretty easy to make and then have a link if there's something you want to use for your classes. They can come up with little sticky notes that they can write down their ideas. It is anonymous as people are coming up as well, just FYI. So practice using descriptive vocabulary, colors, clothes, etc. Great. All right, so those, oh, I see something else. I have always felt a bit deficient in analyzing writing proficiencies in my citizenship. See the exercises being useful and more creative than what I had been delivering. Absolutely, yeah. I'm glad that you find these activities useful. All right, so I am gonna stop sharing the Jamboard and start sharing my presentation again. I have a couple just extra activities to go over with you all, some of which you mentioned in the Jamboard, some of which we did not. So here's another comprehension strategies you can use with this picture. So cause and effect. So what happens first and what happens after? So he is yelling at the TV. The effect, she does not get any sleep. Any other cause and effects you can see from this picture?
I too saw it as a couple. So I saw it as, a lot of strain in the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. She does not get any sleep. Effect, they are mad at each other the next day. Yeah. I just want to point out with these comprehension strategies, just focus on one per lesson. So this can be like after you've completed an LEA, you're still looking at the picture together and you can work on one of these strategies. This is not something you would want to do all of them in one class. That's just too overwhelming. So the next one could be fact versus opinion. So going over the definition of what is a fact and what is your opinion. So fact is there are two people. Opinion is they are a couple. So any other facts and opinions that you can see from this?
He's being too loud.
That's an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like an educated guess.
Oh, I thought we
like,
were looking for opinions. Yes, I agree.
So
That's
either fact or opinion. Yeah. So opinion
Yeah.
is he's being too loud. What is another fact that you can like for sure say from this picture?
He is awake.
He is awake. Yeah. Yeah.
Well.
So making predictions, pretty similar to cause and effect. So guessing what's going to happen next after this scenario is complete. Comparing and contrasting as well. And then KWL chart. We're going to talk about that in the next slide, but does anybody offhand know what a KWL chart is?
Yes. What you know, what you want to know, and what you have learned.
Perfect. Yep.
Sorry, former teacher here.
No, that's great. So what you know or what you notice, what you want to know or what do you wonder about, and what have you learned? So what I know from this picture, does anybody have anything that they know or they notice from this picture?
There are
Someone's
two
trying
people
to sleep.
There are two people at home.
And then I heard someone say one person is trying to sleep.
One person's yelling.
And then what do I want to know? Or what do I wonder about?
Why is he yelling?
I wonder if there's a particular reason the person needs sleep, like what's going on tomorrow or.
And the what I learned part, this is going to be anything. This is like, what did I learn as part of our lesson? What did I learn as part of our discussion about this picture? Is there anything I learned? So it could be, I learned how to spell neighbor because that was part of our discussion earlier. Anything else that maybe a student would have learned as part of this discussion?
How to use Jamboard.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. So that's a KWL chart. Again, what do I know or what do I notice? What do I want to know or wonder about? And what did I learn? So I have a couple extra strategies. These are usually more for our English language learner students, but they could be for adult basic education students as well. So listing yes, no questions or WH questions. Where are they? Who are they? You know, there's all sorts of questions that you can come up with, yes or no. So is he awake? Yes or no? Yes, he is awake. Is she trying to sleep? Yes, she is trying to sleep. Someone mentioned before in the Jamboard writing a dialogue. I think this could be a really fun exercise based on this picture. Like, what is the conversation that they're going to have right after this picture? If they are a couple versus if they are neighbors, how would you go about having this conflict with your neighbor or with your partner? So a dialogue could be a really good one. Playing 20 questions. So, this one I have a little bit of trouble like thinking about how you would play 20 questions with this picture. Like I usually play 20 questions with an idea that's just in my head. Katie, do you have an example of how you would play 20 questions with this picture?
I was just trying to think that as well, Hannah, and I don't.
So you could like think of so I'm thinking pick something out from this picture. So it could be you pick out a chair, you pick out the man, you pick out the remote, something like tangible in the picture, and then you start doing the 20 questions based on that. So is it a person? No, it is not. Is it a piece of furniture? Yes, it is. So go on from there to try to identify the thing that they are seeing in the picture. Sequencing activity. So that could be based on the sentences you did for the LEA. So you could have, if like, this would be like a next lesson, is you could print it out, cut it up, and then you put it in order. So sequencing those sentences that you did before. If you're going to be doing it online, there is a thing called Flippity that does a very similar like way of sequencing things. Again, you'd have to prepare it ahead of time. It's not something you could be doing in the moment, but it's something you could do for a following activity. So I saw something in the chat. This kind of photo is great. Do you have more available? So Brittany, this photo was taken directly from Standout 5. So if you are using Standout in any of your classes, it is like there are full of pictures and you could use any of those pictures to do activities like this. And if you need any of them, I'm happy to provide them as well. So Kathy said, what is Flippity? So I wish I had prepared it ahead of time, but I did not. So Flippity is a website where you can create flashcards or sequencing activities. So if you just Google Flippity, so flashcards and other resources for educators, you can create your own flashcards or activities. You can make a free account using it. This could be a whole nother lesson of like all of the different online activities that are available out there. Flippity is one of them. So there's all sorts of activities that are already created. If you're doing a particular lesson, you can just type in like Flippity vocabulary about cooking or whatever you're working on. And there could be stuff that's already there and made, but you can also use your own vocabulary as part of Flippity. Go back to the slideshow. So we have just a few minutes left. So I would love to ask you all, of the things that we just talked about, what activity are you interested in trying in your next lesson? And do you have any questions about how to do that?
I have a question. I've used this activity a lot with children who are emerging readers. I'm trying to picture using it with a pretty advanced ESL student. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
So this activity I do feel like is more appropriate for more beginning and intermediate level English language learners. I don't think it's impossible to do it with advanced learners. it might just end up being asking them to do a little bit more than 5 to 7 sentences. But you can still work, and it also depends on what their reading level is, because we have very advanced English language learners as far as their speaking ability goes, and their reading and writing is quite a bit lower. I think an activity like this would be perfect because it's words that they already know and are comfortable speaking with and practicing reading that. But if we're talking an English language learner that their reading level is quite high, you know, they're like working full time in like a professional setting that they're reading, writing, speaking English on a daily basis, LEA may not be the perfect activity for them.
I do like the idea that the student would have to practice writing. Well, I could make it the student's writing it herself, because I think my students labor over writing a lot. So this would force them to do something on the spot.
Yeah, and in that case, Emily, if you want it to be both their own thoughts that they're saying out loud and a writing activity, I could picture even just using your phone to record them telling a story and then playing it back to them. And then they have to write their own words from there. I think that is a way you could make it like an activity for a more advanced learner.
Interesting, yeah.
Any other thoughts about what activity you're excited to try in a future lesson, or any other questions about how you could use these activities?
I'll just pop in to say we just have a couple more minutes left. 2 or 3
Thank you,
more
Katie.
minutes.
Yeah.
I've asked one of my early English learning students to do this kind of in a homework, and then we do it in class together. So talk about maybe something they did over the weekend, maybe going to the park or to a museum, and then not putting them on the spot because they've already written something, and whether they've translated and then written in English, at least they already know their story without having to repeat just in front of me.
Great. Yeah, I think this would be a good homework assignment for your students. All right, I'm gonna go ahead. I have a final slide. Just any other questions? I'm happy to stick on for another minute or so just to see if there's any additional questions. We haven't gotten any warning from the main room, Katie. Do you know if it you didn't hear anything about them extending the time since there was that delay getting on the meeting, did you?
No, and I just wonder if maybe the warning system isn't also set up the way we needed it to be.
Perhaps not. Yeah. So let's stick on for another minute. I'm happy to answer any other questions or just chat with you